Hello. Welcome to Brio Digital's Tech for Good podcast. This is the third one that we've done. And today we are joined by Jack Symons, CEO of Gamban. How are you doing, Jack?
I'm very well, Rob. How's it going?
Yeah, not bad. It's a Monday morning, so we're not looking too bad, are we, for a Monday morning?
It's a slow one.
So we're joined by Jack today, and we're going to be talking about gambling. And Jack runs Gamban. Which I'll let you describe it, Jack. You'll probably do a way better job than me. But in essence, it's been going around for about 8-9 years now, Jack? Yeah. And Gamban is what it says on the tin. It is software to help manage and block gambling websites. So it's going to be a really interesting chat. I've got a bit of history recruiting into gambling firms over the years. So it'll be interesting to talk about that as well, and just the current state of gambling in the UK, wider and beyond, and its effects, because I'm not sure we fully know, Jack, from kind of some preliminary conversations that we've had. But yeah, Jack, are you all right just to give a bit of an overview of Gamban and how it's going at the moment?
I always like to start with this kind of idea that, you know, we have a better self. We know what we should be doing and we know what we shouldn't be doing, and you know, this explains why we smoke, we overeat, we gamble, we drink. You know, vices, we understand that they can be fun, but they can get out of control, and when they do get out of control, it can be very difficult to resist that temptation. And so drawing on some of my own experiences with gambling, and seeing what happened with others, I just felt that there needed to be something else to support willpower, or more specifically won't power. The idea that I shouldn't gamble. The kind of distinction, I think, between I should go to the gym and I shouldn't gamble. So I sort of felt that nothing really existed when I was looking for support. I was using sort of butchered versions of parental control systems. I was using other products that were a bit clunky, weren't really fit for purpose. So I sort of built my own blocking software. And over the last,
and was that specifically for you, Jack? Then to stop?
It was
nothing else available at the time.
There were things, but you know what? There was one product that I could only install on a Windows computer, so I did. Anytime you visit a gambling site, it shuts your computer down. And you know, one of the things that was quite frustrating is if I went to visit a restaurant opening time, you know, on a web page just to see if they were still open, because they serve chips and so do casinos, it will block that page. So it's that kind of thing. You're really sort of having to compromise with your liberty if you want that kind of protection. So I think there's a massive difference between parental control software, which is obviously fairly well established, and self-control software, and that's what didn't exist. Particularly, it sort of did, but you know, it was quite nice going into this to see that the concept had been validated, but it hadn't been executed as well as we thought it could have done. You know, and so we just felt that this was something that would be useful to other people if it was useful to us.
Yeah, I think with gambling, I mean, I'm 42 now, so I think I was of an age where you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't gamble. And I kind of feel as though gambling it feels like it's being deregulated a lot. And I feel as though when I was growing up to a point in, you know, through the 90s, it was all the other vices that you mentioned, but gambling wasn't really part of the agenda. From what I could see back then, it wasn't as accessible potentially as it is today. But that maybe has something to do. I am absolutely terrible at gambling. Now, I do know some smarter people than me who, you know, felt as though they were winning. And I think they've used your software as well, but it did seem to get deregulated. I think, was it Gordon Brown's premiership or when he was chancellor? And I do remember a lot of the Americans that came over for the Olympics, and they couldn't believe the scale of the problem in the UK with gambling shots on every corner, etc., and how all our sport is pretty much funded through gambling.
It's true. I think culturally there's a lot more acceptance for gambling. the idea that, you know, everyone plays the lottery and so on. I think the thing about gambling is we often compare it to smoking and drinking to see where it could go, you know. And I think it is fairly unique in that sense. It's also a very unique addiction. In that one more spin could, in theory, it won't, but it could, in theory, get you out of the financial problem that you got yourself into. So I don't think that works for any other vice particularly. And so we often say that with gambling, it's kind of like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, they're flashing lights.
Yeah.
If you like that imagery, those flashing lights aren't necessarily the lights of a machine or a jackpot win, but, you know, an oncoming train. And this is the thing that we've experienced time and time again, that people often have to find that out for themselves. So whenever we use the expression, you know, hit rock bottom, we also tend to use the sort of the imagery of looking into the abyss, falling through the abyss. I think, unfortunately, by the time people sort of decide to take that decision to stop, which is possible, it has to get to a certain point. I'm not saying that's necessarily something that's preventable.
I mean, and often it is rock bottom, Jack.
Often it is. Often there needs to be some kind of reason for, you know, third-party intervention or even just self-realization that it's gone too far. In fact, in my case, it was slightly stranger in terms of my recovery, because when I was trying to stop, I had a big win. In fact, by, you know, I say relatively big win. I was pressing a button on my computer, and one spin, and I won something like £30,000. It was a big setback for me. Because, you know, you try telling a sort of youngish guy that gambling is not good for them when they've just done more than, at the time, an annual salary in sort of the press of a button. So that set me back, and I think, unfortunately, you know, that story is more common than you might think.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And is it the sports gambling, or is it the gaming that you see the worst addiction, or is it just equally the same?
100% the slots and casino.
Slots and casino.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't harm, potential for harm with sports. What I will say is about 75% of our of people using our product are slots and casino, because of its volatility. What I would also say is that often things like sports are used to get people in on a casual sort of, you know, £5 bet, and then cross-sold into more volatile games. Certainly I was, because I came in on online poker, which I used to love. And if I could just stick to online poker, I would. But at the time that I was playing, you know, poker is a game of patience, and
that's why I was terrible at it, Jack.
I love it. A
lot of my very clever friends that, you know, that came out of university, mathematics, they were all into poker.
Look, I don't think I was very good, but I still liked it.
Yeah.
I am more of a gambler. I mean, I knew people that would just play micro stakes over huge amounts of time, and, you know, you can see their charts, and they're doing well. I didn't tend to lose. I don't think I lost that much money playing poker. But at the time that I was playing poker, they were trying to introduce these kind of other volatile games, often sort of the top right hand or left hand corner of the screen. So whilst you're waiting between hands, it's like a mini game of blackjack, and you just start to, your behaviors,
all connecting up your behavior in terms of when you're not doing the poker, everything else is, and that's what then takes over.
100%, and it's there to extract cash out of you. It's so it's so obvious. I mean, that's one thing I think is quite interesting about gambling. It is a very transparent business model. I'm not here necessarily to sing the praises of the gambling sector. I don't think this is a particular victory of the sector at all. But if you think about sort of the harm from social media, which is a lot more obscure, you know, they call it like the attention economy. Gambling is much more obvious. In fact, someone said to me once, I'm worried about this site. I think they might be stealing my money. And I said, you don't have to worry about that. You're giving them your money. It's you don't have to worry about your money being stolen.
It is annoying, yes.
It says it in the the return to player, the RTP. You are giving your money to them.
Okay.
But yeah.
What is the scale of the problem, Jack, at the moment? How you see it? Where's the data behind it? Is it getting worse? I mean, you started in 2015. Have you just seen an uptick, or
no?
Is it peaks and troughs?
I don't trust the prevalence data.
You don't.
The figures seem to be used with an agenda. So wherever you either hear sort of the trade association, the BGC, sort of celebrating a low prevalence rate, or you hear sort of other organizations. Look, generally speaking, country to country, we're seeing about 3 or 4% of problem gambling in the population.
Right.
Then you've got this other kind of metric, which is those at risk. And I propose that everyone is potentially vulnerable or at risk. And by that, I mean, we're all a job change away, or a relationship breakdown away from, or a death away from vulnerability. And so this idea that there is a fixed percentage of the population that is vulnerable to gambling, it seems absurd to me. So I always think with the stats, you kind of have to look behind it. Whilst the stats seem to be going down, it seems that GamStop, the self-exclusion scheme, registrations are going up. Likewise with us, but that might just be there might be other reasons for that. So I don't know.
Positive. If you've got more users, do you see that as a positive, that people are more proactive, or do you see it as an absolute massive negative?
A massive negative.
Right.
We have we operate it is a business. It's actually a B Corp. And I'm happy to go into reasons why it is structured that way. But we have a very unusual approach to this. I mean, and I think it can drive marketing agencies insane, because we're not looking to retain, we're not looking to reduce churn necessarily. We don't want people using our product. Ideally we wouldn't be doing what we do. And so we're in this kind of strange space where if there wasn't a problem, we wouldn't be doing it, and if we weren't doing it, that would be a good thing. So go figure. I don't know where that leaves us as a business, but we genuinely don't. We can improve retention and minimize churn by providing as much value as possible. But we have to go with, I think, the sort of the strategy that the old dating sites used to take. Like, I remember Match.com used to celebrate a declining rate, putting it down to things like love and marriage. I think now these organizations are a bit more pernicious, and it's sort of more about retention at all costs. But we really do try to, I suppose, if I'm being honest, it's a bit bittersweet, because on the one hand, it's nice to see people making a positive change. And if people are going to use tools, we like to know that people are using the best tools. And we understand that the layering of tools, so not using just Gamban, but using GamStop, the self-exclusion scheme, bank blocking, so blocking your mobile, your bank transactions from gambling, and using Gamban, and combining that with talking in some way, so maybe the National Gambling Helpline, is a really good approach to recovery. I mean, it puts you in the best position.
Do you help users with that journey then, Jack? It's not just download the software, is it more encompassing than that, through the journey to?
Yeah, increasingly, yes. We've got some new features imminently coming out, possibly coming out today. Often it depends on sort of how we're held up by some of the operating systems, but these updates help people sort of go through the steps that put them in the best position for recovery. Often it's about having that friction in place between you and gambling, and then you can sort of use that space to understand and gain perspective and recover.
Right. Okay. And how do the gambling firms view your business, Jack? Do they embrace it? Are they supportive? Do they understand the model? Are you working against them, I suppose, as well, Jack? Or is it more, let's just be more sensible about this and help out the people that are struggling?
It's taken me a long time to really understand that question. I think ultimately there is an irreconcilable conflict of interest between what we do and what the gambling sector does.
Yeah.
And in theory, there are good practical reasons to provide support to individuals experiencing gambling harm, but these are profitable players to the industry. And so it really depends. I think where you've got a very, very sustainable, I say sustainable is not the right term, where you've got a gambling operator that sees itself in the market for decades, I think they can take a much longer term view on it, but they're few and far between.
Right.
In fact, what I just said doesn't really apply to some of the biggest gambling operators. Look, I don't think there is there's a kind of there should be a fit, but I don't think there is. There's too much profit at stake, perhaps.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting.
I think that the thing that I've come to realize in this strange sector is efficacy isn't necessarily the driving sort of force for uptake. That's a really poor way of describing it. Often a tool that isn't as effective might be more popular for those kind of reasons you might imagine with an operator. That seems to be my takeaway from having been doing what I've been doing for a long time. I think if you look at the old it goes back a while, but the research done by Bill Edington on gambling operators and sort of attitude towards harm prevention, it does seem that we're still in that sort of halfway lip service. It's not necessarily being done.
It's not being done at a governmental level properly, do you think?
Well, some and some. I mean, we've been doing some work with one state regulator, Ohio, which has been really good. We work with Norsk Tipping over in Norway. That's a slightly different kind of arrangement because they're a monopoly. Finland we're working with, and of course in the UK it's available completely free in the UK. Originally it was made free through regulatory settlements from the Gambling Commission, the regulator, and now it's through GambleAware as a partnership between GamCare, GamStop, and Gamban.
Right.
And I mean, these kind of arrangements I think are a lot better because there's no sort of need to stifle the distribution of this tool because there's no profit agenda at play, you know?
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And do some countries, have they got better legislation in place that you've seen across the EU as opposed to the UK? Is it more open in the UK for harmful gambling? Or
so the UK has always been the more mature market.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best market. It just means it's a little bit further down the line.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's been interesting to see different jurisdictions and their appetite for learning from some of our mistakes in the UK.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned at the beginning the idea of people presumably from the US coming and finding out, you know, how gambling works in our country. I'm as amazed how it works in the US. It's just slightly less obvious.
Yeah.
And you know, I think when you go and look at the way that different jurisdictions run their run their sort of their gambling industry, it's kind of interesting. I don't necessarily know that one way of doing things is better than another, but there is certainly quite a lot of things that, you know, quite strange, unique, possibly some absurdities that I've seen. I mean, for example, I was speaking with one jurisdiction, they treat all gambling data as health data, and another jurisdiction, they treat it as military data. And then you as a service provider then have to sort of orient yourself around how you treat that data, because, you know, if it has a different sort of classification, it needs to be treated differently in line with ICO and security guidelines. So all very strange, especially when we're trying to make this product available globally, because it can be global.
Yeah. Where are you operating at the moment, Jack?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Right.
Yeah. In fact, there's I saw a sign up in. I was just looking at like the global footprint, and I've seen someone sign up from a country I'd never even heard of until yesterday. And I worry that, that there can only be, I don't know how many people live in Norfolk Island, but I looked at sort of the map and just thought, that is incredible that, there are countries we've not heard of that people are using the product in.
Yeah.
One of the things that's quite interesting about the tool being global is you have to sort of really think about what gambling is in different countries. I mean, obviously we think of it as typically takes place on green or red felt, involves cards, chips, dice. But we've had increasing numbers of people saying they want things like cockfighting blocked.
Right.
And just sort of seemingly bizarre things to us, but cruel sports. But so we have to sort of be mindful that it's not just, obviously now it's things like gaming and crypto and skins and all that kind of stuff, which we do as well. But the world's a funny place at the moment with gambling, because it's difficult to regulate what you don't understand. It's difficult to define something if you can't regulate it, and it's difficult to regulate it if you can't define it. So we've sort of had to be quite progressive in our sort of definitions and our blocking, which has been a double-edged sword. But
well, I think my daughter spent £200 on a video game trying to get some new tokens, etc.
Right.
I'm not sure what the leap is between a 9-year-old spending £900 on in-app purchases.
Well, I suppose it normalizes it. The idea of digital transactions for something that's not necessarily. I don't know. I'm sure there's good research out there, but I think I would be. I'd be careful, and I'd just recognize sort of what I've seen is there is a typology of these in-app purchases. Do you know what the game is?
I do, but I shouldn't say it.
Well, if I were to say something like Counter-Strike, for example, or Dota, these are games that allow you to sell what you've won, what you've bought.
Yeah.
So they kind of become their own currency, and then they become, and to me that is indistinguishable from gambling.
Yeah.
Games where you're able to just buy tokens and in-app things. I mean, I've heard of someone spending well over 20,000 a month on free-to-play poker.
Right. Wow.
They just want to be on that leaderboard.
Yeah, and the shiny lights getting up to the top. What's the demographic of the problem, Jack?
It tends to be younger men. It does tend to be younger men, but we've seen certainly in some jurisdictions. We were looking at Canada recently, where sort of within not that long a time frame, we've seen sort of a shift from older to younger. So sort of even since we've been doing what we've been doing, it's been younger. I think generally speaking, it's about 65% men.
Right.
And I think 18 to 35, if that crosses two demographic groups, that's about that covers quite a lot of the space. It's about
really interesting. Oh yeah. Just in terms of the company then, Jack, and what does your applications do? Are you able to just describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So 3 things.
Yeah.
But let's start with the 2 main things. Once installed, the applications are designed to be as difficult to remove as possible.
Yeah.
That's the first half of the challenge. The second half of the challenge is getting the balance right on the blocking. So we block gambling sites and apps. People come to expect all gambling sites and apps blocked, but they do not and understandably do not want non-gambling sites blocked. And
Yeah.
so you tread quite a fine balance. We always say we want people to be able to check in on their favorite football team, but not be able to bet on them. So there are some sites and platforms that are a little bit on the margin. I won't sort of name them, obviously, but you know, it does take quite a lot of skill in deciding what should and shouldn't be blocked. So we have a lot of automated ways of identifying these sites and platforms, but then there's always a manual check to make sure that they fit within that sort of blocking criteria.
Yeah.
So those are the two main things: the difficult to remove and the adequate level of coverage.
Yeah.
And the third thing that we're very much working on, and constantly, well, we're working on all of it constantly, but is how Gamban can be a useful part of the recovery process once installed and set up. So can it help you get to treatment, get the other tools in place, content around recovery, everything that helps people along that process?
Right. Okay. If somebody, what would be the well, not perfect, but if somebody's got an awareness of a problem, what should be their first step?
I mean, first step, I suppose, is awareness. So second step,
or what if they're not aware? Is it monitoring?
I think this is a tool. This is a tool built for people who are aware.
Yeah.
It's not a tool built for enforcement. So it's not something that, an affected other should be installing on someone's device without their knowledge and trying to make them stop using the tool, because it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
I think self-awareness it would be the first step. I think the next step would be to put all of the blocks in place at the same time. And I think that's really important, because if you
not limit, would you say limit first and then, or would you, if there's an awareness there, it's just straight block?
No, you're right. Limits on these platforms do exist. There are some platforms that allow you to limit by product. So I probably, in retrospect, would have been better off blocking myself from other products, but allowing myself to continue playing poker. So maybe go through the limits, and just make sure that see if you can stay. But the problem with gambling is I say if you're anything like me, but clearly a lot of people who use our product, you start with a small limit. You think, okay, I'm going to just spend 10, 20 pounds and lose that quickly, and it's another 10, 20 pounds, lose that, and it's 100 pounds. The escalation, the loss chasing behavior, the win chasing behavior, makes it very difficult to sort of, for those limits to work. And when you think about how easy it is to, not only is it easy to sign up to other gambling platforms, but they're all offering you a bloody bonus to do so. So why would a limit on one platform help you when you can just, I think gradually I'm excluded from every single operator after losing with an operator, and it's like, you can do that. The evidence would suggest that stopping gambling doesn't necessarily lead to an increase in any other vice. I can't remember the research I read, but it is out there. So that's often a concern, that if you stop, you'll develop something else that's unhealthy. But clearly, the best thing I can think of in terms of an outlook on recovery is the time, money, access triangle. So if you think about what a fire needs, it needs heat, fuel, and oxygen. If you remove one of those things, the fire goes out or doesn't start or so on. With time, money, and access, if you remove one of those things, you can't really continue. And so we've managed to work extensively within the access part. Time is a little bit more intangible, but if you can sort of find more productive ways to use your time, then that's brilliant. And then money, obviously, if you've run out of money, I know the risk is sort of, you know, stealing and other sort of forms of getting and payday loans and so on, but money, if you can maybe use an accountability partner or talk about it and get some help in that way, that can be another good step.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see lots of users trying to take the software off, sadly, once they've installed it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't see what people are doing with the software, and so we're not able to see that people do take it off. But we get people coming through customer support asking for it to be removed quite a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a lot more extreme than that, and you know, has unfortunately been we've been threatened if we don't remove. But you know, this is what you sign up for when you're in that sort of better self mode. And I think it's our responsibility, but I know it's our responsibility. If you've decided to make that decision, we have to help you with that at times where perhaps you yourself what I'd say, Rob, is like over the last 8-9 years, the challenge with Gamban has been the adversarial element with the gambling industry.
Yeah.
The difficulties we've had with the operating systems and the restrictions in place with the operating systems, but most of all with individuals trying to circumvent themselves, you know, at that time where urge is overriding their sort of, you know, their better self, their better instincts. There's quite a lot of pressure on a tool, and I think that's why, in a nutshell, we found that the layering of tools with support is the best approach. I mean, you know, I wish I could say that there's only one thing you need to do and so on, and actually the sort of process by which you exclude yourself by getting set up with GamStop, by installing Gamban, by putting a bank block in place, but there's actually quite a lot of benefit to having, you know, it's kind of a cathartic process of stopping gambling, putting those barriers in place. And I know now that
it's the process, isn't it, that people go through on that journey too.
I think so. If you could do it in one click, that would be a bit more dangerous, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I now know that if I wanted to gamble, and I can say this on behalf of a lot of other people, using the kind of, you know, the multiple tools in place, it is so much more difficult to do so. You'd spend a long time trying to find a gambling site. Once you found a gambling site, you'd have to find a funny way of making payment, possibly through crypto currency or something like that. It wouldn't be a very legit site. And then, you know, that process where before it might take sort of a few minutes to log in, deposit, start playing. Now, you know, the sort of hour or two it might take you to find some pretty skanky offshore gambling site that's willing to take your money masked as some kind of random merchant of some sort, not gambling. It's enough to sort of make you think. If only you could do the same for other vices beyond putting sort of a lock on the drinks cabinet, or, you know.
Yeah. Nice. No, it's really. What can be done on a national level, Jack? What would you like to see to make gambling a bit safer for individuals?
Well, I think there's a lot that's being done at the moment.
Yeah.
The Gambling White Paper Review has come out with some very interesting things. It's good to see a lot more funding coming through from or not coming through yet, but money that will come through from the statutory levy.
Yeah.
I think one of the fundamental problems is that a lot of people who work in this space don't actually understand gambling. And I encounter this problem quite a lot. Some do. Most of the people that we work with are very well-meaning, well-intentioned, but to really understand gambling, I'm not saying you need to have lived experience, but I feel that there's levels of abstraction when I'm talking with people that just don't get it. And that can be a bit of a problem. So where you've got sort of like a lot of understanding on public health and other kind of behavioral concepts, like there's no substitute for really understanding what it is. So I'd like to see possibly a little bit more. I mean, I think there is a move towards more lived experience involvement, but again, that seems a bit tokenistic. So I think more understanding of the actual harm. When I'm talking about specifically about slots, it's often downplayed as something that's sort of not particularly relevant.
Right.
But if that's not relevant, I'm not sure what is. So
Mm.
I think to understand the problem, you really have to understand the product. And I haven't even mentioned the idea of, you know, the sort of the convergence of gaming, gambling, and trading. I you know, I would hazard a guess that a lot of people that we're that we in our sort of sub sector, the gambling, sort of safer gambling, gambling addiction space, don't necessarily understand sort of, you know, the harm from things like crypto and NFTs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's why we set up a platform called playerprotection.com to try and bring people together and discuss some of these things. But it's you know, sometimes I think people are quite I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair, but I think it's quite easy to just sort of default to what you think you know about some of these products, and this doesn't apply to everyone. But I'm very aware when I'm speaking with people in the space who have had that sort of lived experience that, you know, there's a level of understanding that's usually quite nice to work with. I suppose it's a bit of a bittersweet thing because you probably had to go through that process of addiction and recovery, but and it's not right that everyone working in this space should have that first-hand experience, possibly indirect experience. But that doesn't really answer your question.
It was a good enough answer for me, Jack. But let's talk about your journey to B Corp. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I presume B Corp fits in well.
Very well.
Doing as a tech for good business.
Very well.
What was your journey with the B Corp organisation movement? And we're still going through it. I think we're about 18 months in.
18 months.
Yeah, through assessment, etc.
It is a process.
Yeah.
I found it enjoyable.
Yeah.
But I did find it like I likened it to cutting the head off the Hydra. You answer one question and two more sprout up.
Yeah.
You say no to one thing and two more sprout up. So you know, it did take us a long time. I think. Look, we've always put people and planet above profit. I think our planet impact is quite minimal. We're a small organization, all remote. But you know, there are some considerations that we can make, environmental considerations, and part of the process has been to recognize those and improve. In terms of people, I mean, this is very much a social enterprise. So when I was very much at the outset of Gamban, and I remember pitching Gamban to a room full of people, and they asked me, "Are you a business or are you a social enterprise?" And the question really annoyed me. I explained both, and they told me why you couldn't be both. Subsequently, a lot of people in the gambling sort of charity space have tried to sort of push us towards conversion to a non-profit or a charity, which I've been it's been quite difficult because we've got, you know, there's some reasons why we can't convert so simply. We, you know, still got some headway to make before we'd be able to convert. But we were a non-profit we were a company limited by guarantee for a while. We'd been working on lots of different partnership approaches that were more donation based that didn't come to fruition. And fundamentally, I don't, you know, I agree with being charitable, but I haven't been that impressed with charity status over B Corp. I mean, I actually think the B Corp has held us to a closer account than
I agree. Very thorough.
Very thorough. And I feel prouder to have achieved this business as a force for good than if I were to sort of, jump through a few hoops and become a charity. And, and whenever I'm told, why don't you become a charity? It's always followed up with, and you can take as much of a salary as you want. And it's thinking about that. That should not be the sort of, the conciliation.
I've dealt with companies, Jack, that have charity status, and I'm wondering, really? I won't name names again, but yeah, they're very much an enterprise.
My other problem is people in charities can leave. There's no skin in the game. There's no, and I've seen this happen before. Just month's notice off, and that can be quite difficult. I mean, I'm very wedded to Gamban. It's, I know the expression, like it's my baby, but it really, I mean, I am literally invested in this product, and I think to be a business, I mean, look, I needed to get this thing off the ground, and with my partner Matt Zarb-Cousin and Derek Webb, who's been incredibly supportive as a philanthropist and benefactor to our project. That's how we were able to get this, fully off the ground. And it was a business. I mean, originally it was equity that we were selling. It's now no longer. We've now got our equity back generously, but that is how we managed to get to market. And I was asked recently what I thought about sort of the I hate the term gambling addiction sector, but what the sort of how conducive is it to startups? It's a terrible space to go into. Absolutely terrible. It's innovation is stifled. It's you can be fooled by these sort of industry accelerators and incubators, but they're just sort of ego trips that try and reinvent the wheel. I mean, ultimately, the discussion just takes place again and again and again. Gambling harm, is it bad? Yes. What are we going to do about it? Try and reduce it. But actual solutions, meaningful, good solutions, tend to just die. I mean, we see that like really effective, as I say, really effective things can be problematic for that different reason.
Okay. Right, Jack, I think we'll leave it. That's been really informative. I've really enjoyed it. Just to have a general chat with you through kind of legislation, the current state, etc. I suppose if you do think you've got a problem, is it gamban.com?
Yep.
Jack? Yeah. And there's lots of supporting material as well on Gamban's website for other areas where you can seek some help as well. So, but yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Jack. It's been great.
My pleasure, Rob.
All right. Cheers, Jack.